The connection she had with her younger sibling was certainly not the same as most others. It was more so akin to what a mother and offspring would realistically be. Sad that it had to be her to share such love and warmth to them when their biological mother never would. But that was ultimately what led up to her making her next decision. She followed the same familiar path, walking down 2 blocks into the city, making a left and past a vandalized painted mural of her city's old historical event, and then finally stopping in front of a dark and gothic building. It seemed more like a prison stronghold than the foster care facility it was advertised in flyers. But since she had a friend do extensive research on the building and was assured that it was safe. And so, on one particularly grim and foggy day, she had left her younger sibling in the largest and most warmest jacket she had, with a handwritten note inside an old envelope in their tiny hand, right on the doorstep of the foster care facility, before she disappeared into the rolling gray fog without looking back. Until that night. Since her sibling wasn't there, she had a faint kindling of hope that they had, in fact, taken her sibling in, well on their way to being found a much better home than the futile attempt she made all that time before. And if there really was a God out there, he would keep her sibling safe and in a much better home with a much better life than the one she ended up in for some reason. It was better this way, she thought. Her parents wouldn't know what happened to her younger sibling and just give up searching for them in the end. Was that just another naive hope? Probably. But she prayed with all her heart that it wouldn't end up that way. She suddenly felt goosebumps spread all along her body, and she slowly peered over her fur-coated shoulder and locked wide, nervous eyes on the silhouetted shadow of a man peering at her from around the corner and dark spiked fence of the facility building. Despite this being an all-too usual occurrence, it still never stopped the feeling of fear from bubbling up in her gut. The man continued to stare at her for another moment before he caught onto her eyes on him. Then, he staggered back and disappeared behind the wall. She stayed in her spot for a couple of seconds, just steadying her rapid heart before she assured herself that the douche had gotten nervous and ran. With an almost stoic expression returned to her mussed-up face, she turned and continued on her way with the assumption that the bridge would be cleared up at that point. She did what she could for her sibling, but now she was back at square one for herself again, the stars snuffed out by the artificial light all around her, and her heels clicked loudly onto the rough cement walkway. She'd go home and wonder if she would ever find home at all. A sudden loud tire screech took over the chilly, still air. Upon quickly turning, she saw a large dark van drive from around the far corner behind her and start speeding down the street towards her. Her heart absolutely stopped at the sight of the vehicle, as it was something very familiar to her. Without her control, her mind went blank with terror and confusion, with her instinct screaming at her to run, but her body disobeying and keeping her feet bolted to the cement floor. Everything after ended up being a mind-numbing blur. She didn't know whether the van stopped where it was or it kept driving, but the van door did open up in front of her, and she watched still as a statue as a hand drew out from the darkness with a gun gripped in its hold. She stared down the barrel motionlessly, before all she ended up seeing was black.